I saw it and I felt bad for him. He's isolated in the Grenadines on his $570 million yacht. And then there are places like Stowe, Vermont. Stowe, Vermont is a popular place for a lot of people to own second homes, vacation homes. And actually only 1 in 3 homes in Vermont is owned by someone who that is their primary residence. 2 out of 3 of the homes in Stowe, it's secondary residence for somebody. And there were articles that came out in some of these more elite magazines about the difficulties that people were facing of making their secondary residence their primary residence. And I didn't feel sorry for people at all. During this time, the Babylon Bee, which is a satirical online magazine, it's a satire, it was a joke. They posted an article saying that in a moving show of unity, celebrities off the coast of Malibu coordinated their yachts together to spell out in the oceans, "We are in this together." So right now, the phrase, "we're in this together," has become a little trite. But today, I want you to see in this passage of Scripture that the Lord, even though he was in a place of majesty, in a place of power, that he has come to be in the middle of this mess with us. That he's come to our brokenness to be here among us. And so when he says that we're in this together, when he says that he's come to be with you, it's not trite, it's real. So let's look at Mark chapter 4 and verse 35. On the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, his disciples, "Let us cross over to the other side." How many of you are ready to get to the other side of the pandemic? Ready to get to the other side of this thing? Jesus said to the disciples, "Let's go to the other side of the sea." And when Jesus says this, it's not because he wants to get away for a little while. It's not because he wants to go for a nice evening cruise on the boat. But rather, there's a purpose in getting to the other side. If you read Mark chapter 5, you see that when Jesus and his disciples do get to the other side, they get to the coast of the Gadarenes, that he meets a demonic man of Gadara. And there he heals that man, brings the demons out, casts the demons out of him. That man's life is transformed. And he becomes a witness of Jesus' power and gospel in that region, in the Decapolis, which means the 10-city region. So Jesus goes over there to rescue this man, who will then become a witness for him. And once that's done, Jesus leaves and goes back to the other side. Jesus had a purpose in this crossing to the other side. Like you, I had a lot of plans for 2020. I had plans of things that I wanted to do with my family that were fun, trips that we wanted to take that we didn't get to do. But I also had some plans for us as a church and us as a ministry, people that we wanted to minister to and reach out to and have an impact on during this year. And we haven't been able to do those things. We've continued to do ministry. We've continued to proclaim the gospel. We've continued to gather for worship, but we haven't been able to do the things that we normally do. I have not been able to go to the county jail and preach to the inmates like I do every month in several months. There have been many other opportunities that we haven't been able to take advantage of because of what is happening right now. And I'm ready to get to the other side, not because I don't want to wear a mask, not because I want things to go back to normal, not because I want to go to my restaurant, or I want to get to the other side so that we can do ministry and have the impact that I feel like God has called us to make. Jesus had a reason to get to the other side. But it's amazing that even though Jesus had places to go, people to see, and things to do, that Jesus took his time in getting to all of those places. I mean, I know that you have a lot of important things to do, but Jesus had some really important things to do while he was here. He was healing people of diseases. He was preaching the gospel. He was saving people from their sins. He had an important task ahead of him. But Jesus walked everywhere that he went or rode in a boat with his disciples. The only time we see him riding on a donkey is when he's riding into Jerusalem just before his crucifixion. Now Jesus, the God of the universe, could have said, "I want to be in Gadarene right now." And he was there. Jesus could have said, "You know what? I need a helicopter because I've got some important things to do. But he didn't. He walked everywhere that he went. He walked with the disciples, and he talked to them, and he taught them along the way. Now, I want you to think about that the next time that someone in front of you is going 55 and a 60. Because Jesus walked everywhere at about 1 or 2 miles per hour. And so Jesus is going to the other side, and they're interrupted. But as he always does, Jesus has a purpose in this interruption. Verse 36 says, "Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was." Now Jesus was in a boat preaching because a multitude of people had gathered on the shore. And so he got in the boat to have some separation between him and the people and to project his voice off the water so that everyone could hear him. And so he's been in this boat teaching, and they just get in the boat with Jesus, the boat that he's in, and they go across to the other side. Verse 37, "And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling." Now, I don't know a whole lot about boats. I don't own a boat. But I do know that it's not a good thing when the water is getting in the boat. And it's really not a good thing when the water is filling the boat. So this was not a good thing. But thankfully, the disciples are with Jesus. Look at verse 38. "But he," Jesus, "was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." I love that. A great calm. "But he said to them, 'Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?' And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, 'Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" The disciples find themselves in the middle of the Sea of Galilee in a serious windstorm. Jesus is with them, but he's sleeping. There's a few things I want you to pick up on. One, Jesus sleeping in the boat shows us that he was a man. I cannot communicate to you the weird, strange, tired that I feel after preaching. But just know that the naps that I take on Sunday afternoon are some of the best naps in the world. Jesus had been ministering to people and preaching to a multitude for hours, using his voice. He didn't have a microphone like I have a microphone. He's having to project, using his own breath to give greater volume to his voice, projecting it off of the sea so that more people can hear. And when he was done, he was tired. And when we see Jesus sleeping in the boat, we see Jesus he is God incarnate, but he has stepped into humanity. He has taken upon himself the weariness, the hunger that humans feel. He's not only in the boat with the disciples, he's in the skin that the disciples are in. He's in the life, the experience that the disciples are in. The disciples get hungry, Jesus gets hungry. The disciples get tired, Jesus gets tired. He is one of them. But while we see Jesus' humanity in this moment, we also see his divinity. Because he stands up, when he wakes up, he stands up and he tells the winds and the waves to stop. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never been able to control the weather. But a lot of times that I wish that I could control the weather. But a lot of times I've looked at my phone and I said, "Oh, the weather's going to be bad later. I wish that we could change that." I don't have that capability. But Jesus did. He told the winds and the waves to stop, to be at peace. And they did. Sometimes my kids will struggle with something. And I'll know that they're struggling with it, but I don't act. I don't step in right away because I want them to try and figure it out themselves. I want them to wrestle with it and put it together, figure it out on their own. And once they're frustrated, they'll say something like, Dad, and do you hear what's in that dad? Dad, don't you care? Dad, aren't you going to help me? Dad, I need your help. And when the disciples call to Jesus and they say, Master, don't you care that we are perishing? It is that same spirit. Jesus, don't you care that we are perishing? And though Jesus was asleep, we should be clear that he was not unaware. He was aware. Jesus knew the danger of this moment. He knew the danger that they were facing in the middle of the storm in the sea, but he also knew that he could handle the danger in a moment. And because he could handle the danger in a moment, he had a peace. There's another place in Scripture where we see a storm arising on a boat in the sea and someone sleeping. It's when Jonah has run away from the call of God and he's headed in the opposite direction of what God's called him to do, and a great storm comes up and the boat that Jonah is on is in danger of sinking. And the crew is tossing stuff over the side. They come down into the hold of the ship to get more things to throw overboard, and they find Jonah sleeping, and the captain of the ship says, "What do you mean, sleeper?" Now, Jonah was asleep out of ignorance. He was unaware of what was happening to him. Jesus was not asleep out of ignorance. Jesus was asleep out of a peace that no matter what was going on, he'd be able to handle it. We should not confuse a lack of action on God's part with a lack of knowledge on God's part. Just because God hasn't acted as quickly as we'd like for him to does not mean that he's unaware of what's going on. What's happening right now in our world is not something that God is unfamiliar with. It's not something that he has been distracted from. He's not asleep and unaware of what is happening. He knows what is going on. Don't confuse his lack of action with a lack of knowledge. And don't confuse his lack of action with a lack of compassion. What did the disciples say to Jesus? Don't you care that we are perishing? Don't you care that we are facing this? Now, here's what's crazy about that statement. You look back at Mark chapter 3, just one chapter previous to this, Jesus goes alone into the mountain and prays all night before he selects his disciples. He goes in the mountain and prays all night, asking God. He's spending time in the presence of God the Father, praying for these disciples. He then comes down from the mountain after spending that time with God and selects these 12, calls them by name, and makes them his disciples. And someone needs to hear this, okay? So lock in with me. Someone needs to hear this right now. Do not believe the lie that God doesn't care about you just because you're facing hardship right now. That is a lie from hell. Because the reality is that just like Jesus came down from the mountain after a night of prayer and called these disciples, chose them to be a part of this kingdom, to be a part of this adventure, Jesus came down from heaven, spent a night in prayer in the garden, sweating drops of blood, and then walked to the cross to make it possible for us to be called into his family. And he called us by name. And right now we might be facing adversity, and life might be difficult, and our plans might be ruined, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't care. Because this is the God who came from heaven, prayed over us, and sought us out and called us by name. And it would be foolishness for us to believe that God doesn't care about us because we're facing adversity. But this is not a new lie. It's the same lie that the serpent told to Eve in the garden. He said, God doesn't want you to eat of the tree because he knows if you do, you'll be like him. He told them, God's trying to keep something good away from you. Satan is constantly trying to convince us that God doesn't care about us when he does. And all God has demonstrated throughout the history of mankind is that he is caring for us. He's compassionate. When Jesus wakes up and he tells the winds and the waves to cease, he says, why are you so fearful? do you not believe? Where is your faith? Jesus wasn't questioning the validity of being scared at a storm. He was asking them why they didn't believe in his power and compassion for them. You see, the world can be turning upside down and the sea can turn into an absolute storm. But when we recognize that God is powerful and he cares for us, we can have peace in the middle of this adversity. I would imagine that all of us have had moments over the last several months where we've said, God, where are you at in this? And this is not new. The psalmist writes in Psalm 44:23, awake, Lord, why do you sleep? Arise, do not cast off forever. But as the psalmist needed to be reminded thousands of years ago, we need to be reminded today, God has not forgotten about you. God has not forgotten about you. The same God that called you by name out of your sin and into his grace, he is here, he is aware, and he has a lesson for each of us in this. Did you see what the disciples said in verse 41? They said, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? Now, these are the same disciples that were with Jesus when he preached on the coast. These are the same disciples that saw Jesus heal the broken and the ill. These are the same disciples that heard Jesus preach, and they reacted as everybody else did, who said, he preaches as one who has authority unlike anyone we've ever heard before. They had heard the powerful message and gospel of Jesus. They had seen him work miracles, but in this moment, they saw a side of Jesus that they had never seen before. Because we see a side of Jesus that we don't normally see when we see Jesus in the storm, when we see him in the crisis. Now, for most of us, when another side of us comes out, it's a bad thing. You probably heard someone say, like, man, they were upset, and a whole other side of them came out. Because we have the side that we project to the world. We have the good side that we want the pictures to be taken of. But when that other side comes out, it's kind of ugly. It doesn't live up to the standard that we were portraying. But there is no side of Jesus that can come out that is ugly. Because every side of Jesus is magnificent. Jesus is like a diamond that no matter what angle we look at, it is still beautiful, but it gives us a new burst of light. Every aspect of Jesus is magnificent. And we learn more about Jesus. We learn more about Jesus in crisis than we do in easy times. We find more meaning in discomfort than we do in comfort. And I know that it does not feel like it. But we are blessed to be with Jesus in this moment and to be able to see a new side of him. In crisis, we not only see a new side of Jesus, but we see a new side of ourselves. The disciples in that boat, they would have recognized in them some great weaknesses and lack of faith in what they should have had faith in. Remember what many of Jesus' disciples were. They were fishermen who went out into the sea in their boats and cast nets over the side. They most likely had been in this body of water or other bodies of water like it multiple times. Most of them got into the boat and didn't think a thing about it because they had done it hundreds of times before. They had sailed the sea before. They weren't scared because they put confidence in their own experience. But when this storm arose, their experience could not save them. And what we've been experiencing over the last several months is something that no one has experience in. It's the reason we keep using the word unprecedented, because it's unprecedented. And our experience, our knowledge, our know-how, our whatever cannot save us from the things that we are enduring. And so this moment has revealed to us the things that we were trusting in that we should not have been trusting in. It has revealed to us the things that we have put our hope, our confidence in that we should not have put our hope and confidence in. And this crisis has not only taught us a new side of Jesus, it's revealed a real side of us, the true side of us. Thomas à Kempis said, "It is good for us to encounter troubles and adversities from time to time, for trouble often compels a man to search his own heart. It reminds him that he is an exile here and that he can put his trust in nothing in this world. If we've come to the place where we've learned that, where there's nothing in this world that we can put our trust in, we're in a good place. Because like Kent Hughes says, God did not and does not come to the self-sufficient. Christianity began and always begins anew with a spirit of need and a spirit of desperation. If we find ourselves in this moment in the middle of the storm, desperate, we find ourselves in a great position to learn who we truly are and who Jesus truly is. Some time ago, I read a profile of a millionaire whose business had started in the Great Depression. And his business had made so much money that his children and his grandchildren would never have to work a day in their lives. There would be plenty of money for them. And the person writing about him had asked him, "What do you wish for your grandchildren? What do you hope for your grandchildren?" And he said, "I know it will be surprising, but I wish that they could go through the Great Depression, because they would learn lessons in the Great Depression that they would never learn in this age of prosperity." There are lessons to be learned and aspects of Jesus to appreciate in this moment. But unfortunately, there's no guarantee that going through a crisis means that you learn a lesson. How many of you have had to teach your children something twice, 5 times, 37 times? Some of you raising your hand. You want to give witness and testify right now? See, we can go through the hard time without appreciating the lesson. And that would be the greatest tragedy. For us to go through the pandemic and not be any different. Not learn more about who we are. Not learn more about who Jesus is. But if you'll go through this time with Jesus in your boat, I believe that you'll see that he has a great power and a great peace to offer you. And that you will get to the other side. Jesus and the disciples did get to the other side. And they did rescue that man. And then they would cross the sea again. There's actually another moment that John tells us about where Jesus and the disciples have to cross the sea. Once again, Jesus is teaching and preaching to multitudes. It's actually the moment where he feeds the 5,000. And they need to cross to the other side of the sea. So Jesus tells the disciples to go ahead across, and he'll catch up to them. The disciples get in the boat, and they begin to make their way across the sea. And suddenly, once again, another storm comes up. And they're like, "Man, ever since we started following Jesus, seems like it storms every time we go out in the water." Following Jesus can be like that sometimes. They're fighting against the wind and the waves, and then they see this figure calling out to them, walking on the sea. And they're terrified because they think it's a ghost. But Jesus says to them, "No, it's I." And John 6:21 tells us that when they recognized who it was, verse 21, then they willingly received him into the boat. And there's another phrase at the end of 21 that a lot of times people just brush by. It seems like just another one of those moments where they're telling us the next place that they went. But verse 21 says that when they received him into the boat, immediately the boat was at land where they were going. When Jesus got into the boat, immediately they were on the other side. Now, I wish that I could tell you that if Jesus is in the boat, immediately you'll be on the other side and everything will be great. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that if Jesus is in the boat, you will get to the other side. The truth is that before the pandemic, we were lost. We just didn't realize it. The truth is that before the crisis, we were in need, but we were unaware. But now that we're in the middle of the sea, we recognize how desperately we need Jesus in the boat. Recently, I heard a lady who's on a church staff. She was born in Cambodia. She was born in Cambodia as her mother was preparing to flee Cambodia. You see, when the Khmer Rouge came into power in Cambodia, he killed all of his political opponents. And then, fearful that a revolt would come against him and take him out of power, he killed all of his political opponents, everyone who sided on that political party. And over 1 million people, perhaps even 2 million people, were killed in the killing fields of Cambodia. This woman's mother carried her as she was a refugee and immigrated out of the country. Now, years later, during the pandemic, this woman called her mother to ask her how she was doing, to check on her, like many of you have checked on your mothers, your fathers, your older family members. She asked her how she was facing the day-to-day and so much uncertainty, and she said, "I'm doing just what I did in Cambodia. I'm just following the footsteps ahead of me." She said, "Mom, what do you mean?" She was too young to remember. But when they walked out of Cambodia through the killing fields, there were many places where there were minefields, there were landmines. So you would walk in the footsteps of the person in front of you because as long as you stepped in their footprints, you knew that you weren't going to step on a landmine. She told her daughter, "I'm just following the footsteps in front of me." But instead of the footprints in the mud in Cambodia, she was following the footsteps of Jesus. You know what Jesus said when he came and he was with the disciples and it was time for him to leave? He says, "I go to prepare a place for you." They said, "How can we get to where you're at?" He says, "I am the way." When the disciples would go out and preach the gospel, they would preach the gospel of the way. You see, Jesus not only came to be in the boat with us, to truly be able to say, we are in this together, to be here with us, he also made the way for us to get to the other side. Jesus didn't just come to be with us in the midst of this adversity. He came to be with us in the midst of it and lead us out. You ever sat at the hospital with someone and felt totally powerless? But you're just there with them. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus didn't merely come to be with us. He came to be with us, but he came to make the way out for us. And if Jesus is in the boat with you, he will lead you out. He will lead you through this, through his power and his peace. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Father, I pray for the one who's here and is lonely. Lord, the isolation of this season has been difficult for them. It's been hard. Lord, I pray that they would know that it's not some trite saying that you came to be with us. Lord, that they would see that you in truth came to be among us, to feel the feeling of our infirmities, to be tempted at all points like we are, that you came to be among us. Father, I ask that if anyone here or watching online feels that loneliness, Lord, may they know that you have come to be with them. May they willingly receive you into their boat. Father, I pray that we would recognize that not only are you here with us, but you have made the way for us. That if we'll follow your footsteps, we'll follow after you, that we will get to the other side. But Lord, help us not to miss the lessons along the way. Lord, we magnify you. We praise you. And lift these things up in the name of Jesus. Amen. Would you stand with me? They're going to lead us in singing, "I Am Not Alone." The words are there on your sheet. Let's sing together as we close out the sermon.
Lord, you fight my every battle, and I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You're my strength. You're my defender. You're my refuge in the storm. Through these trials, you've always been faithful. You bring healing to my soul. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me. You call me as your own. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me. You will never leave me.
I just want to share a couple of things with you before we are dismissed. First of all, a great time to change something is when everything else is changing. And so this is a great opportunity for us to bring some change in our lives. And so next Sunday, we're starting a sermon series on holy patterns, patterns that we can build into the rhythms of our everyday life to help us focus on Jesus, to focus on the Lord and the work he wants to do in us. And so that begins next Sunday. Second, we're slowly taking steps back to offer other things. And so we are offering the nursery for children up to age 2 during the 11 o'clock service and hope to add other children's classes in the days ahead. Of course, that is at this time because who knows what next month may be like. Thank you for being faithful in your attendance and your giving. I'm so grateful for you. I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. God bless you. You're dismissed.